the National Endowment for the Humanities, bringing you the stories that define us.
Please state your name, when you were born, and where you were born.
Okay. My name is Pilar Grijalva Jr. I was born in Fabens, Texas, about 6 miles from here. And June 25th, 1956, to the parents of Pilar and Alicia Grijalva.
Tell me about your childhood. How was it like growing up in San Elizario?
Okay. I have a very unique type situation because my dad, son of Francisco Grijalva, grew up here in Sanelli, and my grandfather had farms in Mesilla, New Mexico, here in San Elizario, in Fabens, Texas, and also in Tornillo. So the first years of my life, we lived in Mesilla in one of my grandpa's farms, and my dad managed that farm. I remember traveling back and forth all through New Mexico, Stoneman Farms, almost, it seems like twice a week, as my dad would come back home and report to my grandpa. Then after the 6 years in New Mexico, we moved to Tornillo and to the farm he had in Tornillo. And again, the commute from Tornillo to Sanelli was nothing because that was almost every other day. So, and then in the 70s, after my dad sold the farm in Tornillo, we built this house where I live at now. We helped my dad build it. And so we moved here, and my last 3 years, high school and right after, we moved to the old house where my dad grew up in. And then after that, I got married and ended up in Arizona. After 20 years, we moved back to El Paso, and I bought the family home from my mother, and have been living here since. But growing up, it was always either Tornillo, Sanelli, back and forth. So a lot of the people that I knew were from here, from Sanelli. So that was how that is how I ended up back in Sanelli after the house that my dad grew up in is right across adjacent to this one. It has since been sold, not to the family, but it's one of the oldest homes here in San Elizario. And that was where my great grandfather built the house, and then my grandfather inherited it, and then my dad bought it from the family. All this around here were farms, and so that's how we met a lot of the people. How I grew up with a lot of people here in Sanelli is that my dad would hire a lot of farm labor locals from Sanelli, and we grew up with them because we would work the farms along with them. And that's how I ended up here in Sanelli. Growing up here, I love telling stories. So growing up here, we would work the fields. That was wherever my dad needed us at. So at a very young age, we learned to drive the tractor, and we learned drive trucks, and just work hard on the farm. So I remember at 8, 9 years old, when we were driving the tractors, not being able to reach the clutch on the tractors and not having the strength to push the clutch in. And so you just had to hang on to the steering wheel, push down, and then try to pull the clutch out slowly. And it was, I have vivid memories of growing up working the tractors here on the farms here in Sanelli and in Tornillo. My grandfather died here on, actually almost right here where this house is sitting. It used to be an alfalfa field. He was lifting bales, and he died working, had a heart attack. while lifting bales and passed away. I was in 64, 65. Coming to my grandmother's house it was almost every weekend, and playing around this area before it was developed. As far as housing goes, that was just an experience, because all the family would get together and we would all come together. We would all have big fiestas, matanzas, and all that kind of stuff here. And even funerals. I remember my grandfather was at his funeral vigil. At that time, we used to have the bodies at the home. So my grandfather's body was here at the house before we took him to the local cemetery to bury him. And so it was I tell people, I would not trade this growing up on the farm and here in Tornillo for anything. It's been just a beautiful experience growing up on the farm, and the surrounding farmers, and religion has always been a major part of our families. And so I remember that on the day of Saint Isidore, which is a patron saint of farmers, we would get with the priest. We would be altar servers or participate in other ways. And we would have like tractor parades in which we would go from house to house or farmhouse to farmhouse. And the priest would bless the homes and then celebrate mass at one of the fields or one of the farmers' homes. And that was traditional around here. Serving as an altar server in both Sanelli and Tornillo was a great experience, especially in our mission church here in Sanelli. And so that's how I grew up. A lot of laughter, a lot of parties, and not so much parties, but just people getting together and then experiencing good times here in Sanelli.
Do you remember any stories about your family lineage that your parents or your grandparents told you of Sanelli?
Well, there is a major story here concerning the house that my dad grew up in and the property surrounding it. Apparently my stepfather, my great grandfather, Jesus Cobos. He was the owner of a lot of the farms. My grandfather, Francisco Grijalva, by marriage inherited. Jesus Cobos adopted my grandmother Anita and her mother, and so that's how we got into this family farming business and stuff. Anyways, apparently when Cobos died, he did not have any banks, or there was no record of him depositing money in banks and stuff. He was very wealthy. One of the windows in the church in San Elisario is he paid for it. It's the first window to the left in the mission church, and it has his name on it. And Mr. Cobos, my great grandfather, step great grandfather, when he died, apparently there was no money found, and his farm equipment, everything was still here. The house is still here and everything, but the treasure that goes within our family legend, the treasure, they never found it. And so a part of the story is that he buried it. And so my grandfather apparently looked for it and didn't find it. And I remember my dad looking for it and almost, shall I say, to an obsession, looking for it, and he never found it. So apparently, around here in this area, there is a treasure that my great grandfather Jesus Cobos left behind. Nobody's ever found it, but he did not leave too much money on hand, and he was a very wealthy person. So, for treasure hunters, maybe that'd be a good uh, find. And when we were young, my dad was very involved in the church, and so he would not hire us, he would volunteer us to go and help him paint the church, sweep the grounds, or do whatever we had to do here at the mission. And so we would again, hear a lot of the stories. One of the ones that the parish secretary told me when I first got here for the second time in the 1996 is when we came back to Sanelli. And she used to say that right there next to the mission, towards the Socorro Road, is a old cemetery. And when they transferred the bodies from this old cemetery to the new cemetery, which is on Thompson Road. And she used to tell me that her relatives told her that when they were, because this happened back in I don't know what year it happened, but when they were transferring some of these bodies back to the new cemetery, that some of the caskets had opened. They were just pine boxes, and they had opened. And inside the casket, she told me that this is what her relatives told her, that they would find scratch marks inside the coffins from people waking up during after they were buried, and that she could see the nail marks. That not she, but the relatives claimed that they could see the nail marks in the coffins as they woke up while they were already buried in the graves. I've always found that very interesting. Right now, that plot of land, we don't use it. It has a memorial on there, and it's just the plot of land where our old cemetery used to be, because not everybody decided to move their loved ones to the new cemetery. So that's a very interesting story. And we, like I said, a lot of the workers that my dad hired were locals, and so we had his name was Chavoy Martinez. He worked for my dad for a long time. The Perez's worked for my dad for a long time, and Chavoy was a very funny man, a very sharp guy, and he used to tell us stories about, that house over there. There's Martians in there. We're all little green men, he used to say, and I don't know where all those legends came from, but he used to tell us about that. When we would chop cotton around this area right here, the Mr. Perez had some apple trees in his yard, and so we would sneak off and steal his apples. We were young, and we would. It was more like work play. We had all our buddies. We would all chop cotton in the fields and everything. But when we had a chance, we'd sneak off and go steal his apples, and he would be upset, at us stealing his apples. I think they were Chinese apples, those little we call them. I forget the name. Anyways, other stories from Sanelli. We used to come here, and like I said, we spent a lot of time here in Sanelli. We actually grew up here, not living here, mainly in Tornillo, during my childhood years. But we would come here on Sundays to watch the baseball. The baseball players play baseball. People like Agustin Payan, I remember that name because he was a local baseball favorite. Oh man, I don't remember the names of a lot of them, but it was a big thing to come to the park Sunday afternoons and watch them play ball. And it was Sanelli has always, well, like any other town, but always had a lot of talent as far as baseball, music, even priests and deacons. That I know of, we produced 5 from Sanelli that I remember of. So as far as religion, the church, we've always, everything evolves, not evolves, but everything rotates around our religion and of course the mission church. So other stories. One of the legends around here is the rebote, which is catty corner from my house. The rebote was a handball court, and all the local men would play rebote. The Juarez family owned the rebote, and they everybody around here played rebote, which is handball. We used to, when we were kids, of course, after working on the farm, my dad would always slip by and have a cold beer at the rebote, and he would also play rebote. And they would ask us to shine the rebote balls. So we got shinola. They were made of leather. It's a little bit smaller than a little league ball. They were made of leather, and we would shine them, and then they would hit it against the wall. And at the end of the day, or at the end of the matches, their hands were swollen from hitting that ball so much. Tony Soto, which recently passed away, had a eye that was injured, and so he always had an eye that looked the other way while playing rebote. And so we grew up with the rebote. It was every time we were in Sanelli, after a long day's work, my dad would go to the rebote. We would go there and have Coke and potato chips with hot sauce, and my dad would have his cold beers and play rebote for the rest of the evening till my mom would come and pick us up. Stories from Sanelli, of course, we have all the historical settings as far as the Billy the Kid stuff and the Salt Wars and the Wild West type town that Sanelli was, or still is. Since then, we have seen a lot of people from around the area, El Paso, get away from big cities in the 70s. My dad started developing a lot of his land and sold it off as a matter of fact, my dad was as a colonia. So this area was deemed a colonia by the government, and of course my dad got in trouble because he didn't follow all the laws and regulations concerning land development. And so since then, this and the house, well, this house is the only house that belongs to Grijalva family that was original to the original families, Grijalva family here in San Elisario. Other stories. I just remember the hard work that the people around here were, and and how they made a living, just living on the farms or working on the farms. And everybody, Miss Perez, she was known for, she had, I think there were 13 or 14 children, maybe more, I don't remember. They were good friends of ours, and she was known for making the biggest tortillas and the tastiest in Sanelli. Of course, she made a lot of tortillas because most of the members a lot of the members in her family were male and went out to work on the farms or wherever. And so Sanelli has always been a very veteran military town, if you want to put it that way, because we don't forget our veterans. The church is decorated with and dedicated to the veterans when it was remodeled in 1942. And so you'll see a tribute to the veterans and the people who helped remodel the church after the war and put their names on the back of the church. And so for the veterans, Sanelli doesn't forget their military service veterans.
When you say we, do you mean like you and your siblings? Did you have any siblings? Or like you and your friends?
It was we, I mean, me, my siblings, my cousins, friends that grew up here in Sanelli, and people that worked for my dad who were also friends. They worked for my dad, but they were our age. A lot of them were, and so we were friends with them. Mm-hmm.
And where did you go to school? How was it like? Did you know
Okay,
Mr.
I
Alarcon?
went to school in Tornillo for 11 years of my life, and we were working on my mainly because that's where my grandfather had his farm at, and one of his farms, one of his many. And so my dad managed that farm in Sanelli, I mean in Tornillo. And then after 11 years from first grade to 11, we moved back to San Elizario, and we started building this house where I live at now. And then in the meantime, we lived in the old house where my dad grew up in. So we lived there while we built this house. Sanelli at that time did not have a high school, or they had a sky school, but because they started their high school in 72, 73, I was already a senior, so I couldn't come to Sanelli High School. I had to go to Clint High School. So I graduated from Clint the last year of high school because Sanelli didn't have a high school. We commuted back and forth while we were building this house from Sanelli to Tornillo to Sanelli, and then to go to school to Tornillo to finish up that year over there. But my final year, I could not finish in Tornillo. I had to graduate from Clint because Sanelli did not have a high school. So, but what was the question on that one?
If you remembered Mr. Alarcon from school or anywhere from town.
The Alarcon family has always been very well known here in this parts, and everybody around here is related. Mr. Alarcon, no, I can't say that I remember him. A lot of the students would talk about their teachers. I can't remember their names and stuff, but most of my schooling was in Tornillo. We knew a lot of the priests at the time because we were here every weekend, and so we were involved in the church and stuff. But as far as the teachers, no, I can't say that my family and the Alarcones were like around here. Everybody is interrelated, And so my cousins on my mom's side of the family were Alarcon from here, from Sanelli, direct relation to those, the Alarcones, the superintendent of Sanelli schools and stuff. But as far as me being directly involved in any of that, no, I wasn't.
You mentioned your father had you volunteer in the church. What did you do there?
Oh, that one was very vivid memories of that, because in I would say it was around 1971, 1970. My dad volunteered us, or actually, we actually got paid, if you want to put it that way, to paint the church. And so there was a part of the people that helped us on the farm also helped us paint the church. And at that time, well, there was no scaffoldings and stuff like that. So we painted it the best way that we knew how. And I remember Mike Rivera, may he rest in peace, worked with us on the farm, him and his cousin Charlie and Freddie. They were all related. And we were painting the church, and we're painting the outside. Well, Mike, he was fearless. And I remember him running up and down the steeple and kind of mocking us. Hey, check it out, check it out, check it out. He wasn't afraid of heights. We were hanging on the deer lights, and we were painting the steeple and that part of the church. That time it was a project, and my dad did get paid for painting the church. And it was about 70, maybe 70, 69, 70, around that at that time. I was maybe 14 years old at that time. And so during the fiesta, we would have two fiestas. We would have it in September 27th, which is the actual date of San Elisario. Excuse me. And we would have the May fiesta for San Isidro. And during those fiestas, my dad many times was chairman of the fiestas. And so I was 14, 15, and he would send me into town in the church van and say, hey, go pick up this and go pick up that, go to downtown. And so I would pick up a lot of the supplies that we needed at the fiesta. And so I always helped him in the church in whatever committee he was involved in, to either help put the puestos together or help go get stuff from the city to bring over here to sell at the fiesta. One year, my dad was a welder by trade, also a farmer, but he worked at utility trailer as a welder at nights, and then he would work the farm during the day. And one year they had this big project of building puestos for the fiesta made out of pipe. And so we built them all right here in this property. And people would come, and we would cut the pipe and weld it and make the permanent puestos for the fiesta. We would pull them into the grounds every year and then store them in the church parking lot, or not parking lot, but church grounds, until the next fiesta came around, and then we all pull them back and put them back in place. So we would help with the building and maintenance of these puestos that we built for the church. Of course, after I came back from Arizona, then those puestos were not existent anymore after 20 years. But that was, part of the stuff that we volunteered for in the church.
Tell me more about the community. How were the people with each other in San Eli?
The community has always been very united in the sense that everybody knows everybody here. And then everybody is related to somebody here. I always tell people that Sanelli is the Garden of Eden of this part of, of the world, because everywhere that you go and you mention Sanelli, oh yeah, I had a relative there, or somebody always has something to say about Sanelli. So the people here, we always really got along. Of course, we had our, like during the fiestas, you had these fights that would brew up between different families or different communities. They would say, Fabens came over and had a fight with Sanelli, or Clinton Sanelli would have a fight. But all those were just things that came up during the fiestas when people would start, of course, drinking and then get a little violent. But no, for the most part, Sanelli has always been very peaceful. Everybody was known by their family that they came from. My dad would mention the family names. Oh yeah, that's Boni Madrid. Oh yeah, that's Montes. Oh yeah, that's Loya. Uh, Different. Oh yeah, those are Alarcon. Those, and so everybody was known by the families that they came from. And then to get down to the specifics, then you would mention them by name, but a lot of times it was by their family name. We were always very welcomed and always welcoming. We were always very peaceful. So we got along with everybody here in Sanelli as we were growing up. There was never any uh, division among us and anybody here in Sanelli. We were, I would like to think that we would be remembered by the old timers as, especially my dad, the family that would. My dad was a very caring person, and he would hire anybody that needed work to work on his farms and help them to achieve their goals. And so that was always important in our family. So as far as the community goes, everybody got along with everybody, and if anybody had any issues, it was between the parents. We were working one of the fields here in Sanelli one year, and one of the neighbor kids decided to, from his horse, shoot at us with a BB gun. Well, while we were working the fields, and after my dad came in, we told him about it, and he was very upset, and he didn't go and speak to the kid. He went straight to the parents' house, and he took his BB gun away, and he busted it in front of his parents and told him, don't you ever let your kid do this again. So it was rough when it came to stuff like that, discipline and stuff. But they weren't. I can't even consider them enemies because of that, and we were just mischievous and did crazy things then. But everything was settled mainly through the families. No, pues, tell Martinez's son that he's out of line. He's need to stay. And so go talk to the dad. And I think that's how I saw a lot of the community here in Sanelli. And that's how my dad dealt with a lot of the stuff. It was by family and not so much individual.
Like kept each other accountable.
Pardon?
Like kept each other accountable.
Yes, it did. It did keep everybody very accountable, and it was embarrassing to the family if somebody put a complaint, or not a complaint because nothing was formal, but if somebody's dad came to your house and suspected you of something, you know, what, you know, whose family do you come from? And it was more a reputation on, to me, it was more a reputation on the family instead of individual. You didn't want to do anything to hurt the reputation of the family. That's the way I saw it, you know. And so that kept us in line, and because everybody knew everybody, that kept us in line. It was like, if you did something wrong, and like we would steal Mr. Perez's apples, well, uh, he never complained to my dad about. He knew who we were, and he knew we were mischievous. But if he really wanted to make a deal about it, he would come talk to my dad. He wouldn't talk to us about it. And so everything was, the way I saw it, it was mainly just keeping the family name, you know, just keeping in line with who you're, where your, not so much your reputation, but your integrity lies.
And since we're talking about the community, who were some memorable people that like just come to mind?
In Sanelli, well, it was, to me, they were mainly the farmers that my dad used to talk about. Those were the families. I mean, to me, the community, the Perez, big family, beautiful family, very nice people. As a matter of fact, my aunt Abigail Perez married my uncle, my mom's brother, Clinton Sanelli, and so, but the Perez, the Martinez, Lázaro Martinez was known as the local veterinarian. He worked at one of the local feedlots, but whenever the farmers had any problems with their animals, they would call upon Lázaro, and he was long-standing member here in Sanelli. Chavoy, all from that same family, the Martinez family, very well-known family. We had Alarcon, of course, was well-known family. Loyas, Lorenzo Loya was known as the Marranero because he had a lot of pigs. And if you wanted a pig, go to Mr. Lorenzo Loya, and you can have your pig for Christmas or whatever. We had a lot of the Mendoza. Wow! Oh, one of the biggest farmers here was Rafael Gonzalez, employer of a lot of people here in Sanelli, and he was well known for the a lot of the land that he owned and stuff. Now we had people like Mr. Minas, you know, worked for Rafael Gonzalez, and Zunigas, you know, Madrid, Montes, Juarez. It was you know, we just knew them all through families, and then we would hang around with the kids. We were kids together. Godoy, you know, Guerras. Oh man, there's Sotos, Almanzars. All of these families were part of the original families here in Sanelli, and it was all just try to keep up a good reputation.
Since you said that your father's workers came to mind, what did your father grow like in his farm?
It was, a lot of it was cotton. Now, when my father grew up, my father had a thing about not eating too much turkey and wearing jeans. My father would wear slacks while he worked on the tractor on his farm. And he said all his life he grew up with turkey and poultry and wearing jeans. And so when he grew up and could afford his own things, and he worked in slacks and wouldn't eat poultry products because that's what he grew up with. Part of the land around here, when my dad was growing up, there was a lot of fruit trees. They grew potatoes, they grew chili, they grew a lot of tomatoes. But in the sometime in this history, and I don't know when, a lot turned to cotton because of the government subsidies. So a lot of the people started planting cotton, and so a lot of the fruit trees and a lot of the staples that were grown then it turned to cotton because of the government subsidies and the need there was for cotton. And so my dad grew mainly cotton and then alfalfa. We used to pick bales. As soon as we learned to pick them up, we used to pick bales, and we would sell them to the local dairies, hay bales. And so it was mainly alfalfa and hay. Every now and then we would grow maybe barley or oats. But then depending on what was going to be good for market for the following year. But cotton always took the main road and everything. So it was mainly cotton.
Did you have any animals?
Oh yes. Oh yes. All the farm animals. We had chickens, and then we had calves, milking cow. My brothers and I would play races as to how fast we could milk a cow because it was all done by hand. And so before we went to school, we would have to feed the animals, and when we came back from school, we would have to feed them again. So sometimes if you weren't careful and you were in a hurry and you put your school shoes on, you would be the rest of the day smelling the stuff from your bottom of your foot because you went out in your school shoes to feed the cows and the calves because you got up late. And so that's how we grew up. A lot of the animals. Another interesting thing was that there was some wildlife here too, and part of our challenge here was in the summers when we didn't have much to do or after working a farm or whatever, we would knock down the hornets' nests and then run like crazy because they sting and it was very painful. But if we saw a hornet's nest, we were like, okay, let's go knock it down and see what happens. It was more open field, so there was, I don't remember seeing any rattlesnakes or anything like that here, but bugs and all of that we grew up with, just like growing up on a farm. Mice, roaches, yes, that's all typical of growing up on a farm.
You mentioned San Eli is very veteran military. How was the town during World War II?
Well, I was post-war, but I have an uncle, Antonio H. Grijalva, and he my dad's brother, and he lost his life in World War II. And so it was, like I said, Sanelli has always been very supportive and fond of their heroes here in Sanelli, especially those that have lost their life or limbs and stuff that we remember. And I do remember that my grandmother never really recovered 100% from the death of her son. She used to love to paint, and she painted some murals inside the house, the old house, to kind of, I guess, relieve her pain from the death of my uncle Antonio. But military was a way out of the hard life of farming for a lot of the people here. My grandfather, he was, all work on the farm when you were out of school, and no college, no nothing. You're going to work on a farm. You're going to manage my farms, and that's it. And so a lot of the people's way out was through the military. But of course, to many of them, they paid the ultimate price for that. So yes, post war, no, Sanelli remembers their veterans.
What are some good memories of San Eli? This is like really the last question. Anything else that maybe I have missed that I forgot to ask that you want to say?
Well, I think a lot of it, to me, a lot of the good memories was just the people. The everywhere you went, you were known, and then you were respected, and that attitude kind of kept everybody in line, because you just simply wanted to be respected, wanted to be a good person, and so my biggest memories, of course, were working on the farm, coming to grandma and grandpa's house, and play on the spinning wheel. They had this spinning wheel that had this big round stone wheel on it, and I don't know what they used it for, but we used to come and visit, and we would sit on it and sharpen sticks or pieces of metal or whatever as we turned the pedals on it. The houses, most of them made of adobe, so most of them had leftover mezcla, limestone type mix in their backyards from whitewashing their houses or homes with it and stuff, or plastering their houses with it. We used to play in that stuff. It would get hard like a rock, and we would just play around it. One of the big memories that I have, we had a party here at my grandfather's house, and the comida, the food, the elotes. We would pick fruits straight from the field, and then we had this big olla. As a matter of fact, I still have it, and we would fill it up with elotes and water and boil the elotes, and then we would have whatever, mole or chicken or carnitas or whatever, kill the fattened pig, and then the party. I remember those big gatherings and the food and everything that we ate, and then the family coming together as a family and a community, and just that's my biggest memories. Just having fun even in the midst of hard life. Just because it wasn't easy, especially at a young age. We didn't have a lot of the funds to even playing sports. We didn't, for us as farmers, we didn't have that luxury, especially in the summers, because we had to work the farm, and so we asking our parents for money. My dad never really paid us for working on the farm, but we always had everything that we needed. We never until we started dating. He's like, there's the car, it's got gas, just be careful. And always, go to church first, and then go out and be careful. So that's what those are my best and fondest memories, is just family and how family works together, and other than that, no, I let me see, other stuff in Sanelli. I was mainly working these fields around here that are all covered with houses now. Being on a tractor and disking a field or plowing it and being on it all day from sunrise to sundown, and it gives you a lot of mental therapy type stuff to really think about stuff. You got nothing else to do but run that tractor all day. So it was to me, it was very therapeutical living and growing in the farm. And like I said earlier, that experience, I would trade it for nothing.
Did you meet your wife in Sanelli?
No, she's from Socorro, and it was a blind date, and I was real good friends with Larry Minas, who worked for his dad, worked for Rafael Gonzalez, who was a good land employer here because of the farms. And he had a friend he wanted to go out with, but his friend told him that she wouldn't go out with him unless he finds a date for her friend. And that's how I met my wife. She's from Socorro, and when we came back from Arizona, my mother and my youngest sister were the only ones living here in this house, and it was in dire need of repair. And my mother has another house in Clint, and so it was in dire need of repair here. And when we came from Arizona, my mom told us, "You guys stay here with your family," and eventually I ended up purchasing this house from my mother, and so both me and my wife settled here. But she's from Socorro. I met her on a blind date, and here in Sanelli, while we lived in the old house, while we were constructing this one.
It actually came to mind. What did your mom do if you and your father were out in the fields?
Yes, my mother, she as we were growing up, both members of the family both my mom and dad, always worked. My mom more seasonal, even in Mesilla when we lived over there, and in Tornillo, she mainly worked at the cotton gins as a scale master. So she would weigh the cotton trailers as they came in to have the cotton gin. And then after that, she ended up working at here in Sanelli at the school as a nutritionalist. And then all her career was then here in Sanelli as a nutritionalist, and she managed the school cafeterias. At the end, she was the cafeteria manager for the school cafeterias here in Sanelli City. And she made a career of cooking. In our family, all of us cook, boys or girls, and even all of our nephews and nieces. In our family, everybody cooks. So one of the biggest things about getting together is, of course, food and who prepares it and how we prepare it. One of the things that we still do is pit barbecue. I mean, the real pit barbecue. And this is passed on from our parents, and not our parents, my dad and my grandparents. We have a pit in the ground, underground, and we burn it and put embers in it, or we till the wood turns to coal. most of the time what we like to use is pecan wood. Then we wrap the meat in foil and then burlap sacks and then we wire it all together, and we bury the meat in the coals and then seal it. And then the next day we go and take it out of the pit, and the meat is just the best thing you've ever tasted. So anyways, that's one of the things that was handed down us all through all families, is food, what we prepare and the way we make it. And so my mother, she was a cook and then a cafeteria manager at San El Ciario. Unfortunately, and it is part of my family history, but unfortunately my dad died from cirrhosis from alcohol, and then and because of that my mother and my father were separated, and so then that's how I ended up in this house. My mother moved then back to Clint. My dad had been deceased. He died in 1993, and while I was in Arizona. So when I came back, then I bought this house with my mom, and then she moved to her house in Clint. But yes, that's what my mom did. She always worked, and then kept the house too. I remember her, at that time it was black and white TV or even color TV, but it was TV and radio. And my mom would put that radio on loud in La Rancherita, Mexican station in Mexico, and listen to her rancheritas, and she would sing all day and clean house, and then go to work at night. And then I really don't know how she did it, but then get up in the morning and off we go again, listening to radio, cleaning house. Everybody had their chores. Everybody had something to do. We learned to wash dishes at a very young age. And we learned to cook at a young age. And my mom would make cheese out of the cow that we milked. She was always cooking. She would make pan de levadura, the most delicious bread you've ever tasted. She was an excellent cook. And so other than working the house, the loads, there was 8 of us in our family. This happened in Torneo, but it was my dad grew up in Sanelli, and it was his religious upbringing that helped here. But while we were in Torneo, it was a far away from El Paso. My mom had Rh negative blood. And so at that time, Rh negative blood for pregnant people was not a good thing. And so when we were in Torneo, my sister Magda was born. And after that, my brother John was born. John was born very ill. All my sisters were 7-month premature preemies. They all lived. My mom lost 4 children. Gregory, Lawrence, John. John was the last one. Christopher, Gregory, Lawrence, Christopher, and John. When we were in Torneo, my mom had John, and John got very sick, and my mom did too that night. My dad knelt us all in front of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, a picture of the Sacred Heart, and put us all in prayer in the middle of the night, and asked God to take care of us while we were in Torneo, leaving the family behind so that he could go assist my mom and my brother John at the hospital. To me, that was a sign of the strength of my dad's faith. And so he left us in the farm. We the following day he came back and said that John had passed. But those examples of faith in the family, to me, have always been fundamental and central to who now I am as a dad, as a person. It has a profound impact on who you are formed to be, and of course that's passed down from our grandparents, and our upbringing and how we grew up. So, but that's who my mom was. Very faithful person, very, very faithful person. My dad, very faithful too, pero very he did what he wanted to do, and that's it. So yes, that was my mom. She also died from cirrhosis, but not because she drank too much, but because some of the medication that she was taking had an effect on her liver. But my dad, yes, he got into financial problems, and especially during the development of his land here in Sinelli. And that's what that's not what drove him to drinking, but that did not help his situation, and so he ended up dying from cirrhosis.
Faith and community, I think that's beautiful, growing up with both of those. And like you said, have made you who you are today. So yeah.
Yes, and especially small towns. I mean, these small towns do have an effect on because of the, everybody knows everybody. You can't hide who you are. And so it does keep you, like you said earlier, it does keep you accountable, in a certain way. And especially when your parents back you up. Okay. I remember one incident when we came back to Sinelli to live here. I had to go to school in Clint. Clint was a little different than Tornillo. And so I had a lot of friends here already established because I grew up here. Well, weekends or whenever we were here. But I couldn't understand, and I didn't know about discrimination and prejudice. In Tornillo, yes, all of our teachers were white teachers, none of them. And even here in Sinelli, all of the teachers were from what I understand, but I can say that of Tornillo, all of them were white. Teaching Mexican children or Mexican American, or however Hispanic, however you want to label, about something that they knew nothing about, our culture and who we were. And I noticed that when I started going to school in Clint, discrimination. Now, of course, in the 70s, that was a time of Viva la Raza and Mecha and Chicano movement, and I was not heavily involved in it, but I could understand the cause, and so I was always speaking up, which got me in trouble. And so when I went to Clint, and this is where the backing up by your parents goes. When I was in Clint, they told us to cut our hair, and I spoke up, and I was grabbed by my white teacher by the collar, pushed up against the wall, and he told me, "You will cut your hair or you are expelled." And so I opted to be expelled. And when I got home, my father walked in and said, "What are you doing here? Shouldn't you be in school?" And this is my senior year. And I told him, yeah, Dad, they kicked me out. And he's like, oh, he said, I bet you I know why. You were either smoking, or don't you think it'll be easier for you to cut that hair instead of going through all this trouble? And he was upset. He was mad at me. And I told him, yeah, Dad, but you've never laid a hand on me. And especially because I wouldn't cut my hair. And he looked at me with these angry eyes, and he told me, what are you trying to tell me? I said, well, this teacher got me from the collar and threw me up against the wall because I wouldn't cut my hair. And that was the end of the conversation with me. And immediately he took off to school and he wanted some answers. It was a very controversial time, long hair and all of that. But for me, it was a proud moment in my life to know that my dad backed me up on that one, especially when it came to violent behavior by teachers. And I would just, that's my dad. Yeah. So yeah, that just a little story from the difference in cultures. Sanelli was, I don't know if they had those kind of problems here, but I know Clint did. Clint was a little more on that side of the fence, if you want to put it that way. Sanelli, I think, was more very cultural as far as the Hispanic culture goes.
Yeah, a proud moment for your dad there.
For me, it really does, affect. He went as far as the school board and told them that, and then the following year that teacher wasn't there anymore. Of course, I wasn't there either because I graduated from high school. But yes, he was. When it came to his children, no, you didn't mess with his children. He would let you know. And my dad never laid a hand on us. Never. It was always, and just by his lecturing us, it was enough to make us cry. That was it. He would lecture you till he made you cry. So yes, he was. When it came to that, the strongest man that I knew, my biggest idol, the man that would seem like was going to live forever. And I don't mind us sharing this, was done by a disease called alcoholism. That's what alcohol does. He was my idol. He was the strongest man I ever knew, but alcohol made him, and makes us, weak. And that was, and that eventually, that's how he died.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Thank you for sharing with us